Next, let's talk more about agriculture in California. And to provide some contrast, we can talk about what agriculture and then what was practiced before agriculture in California. And the earliest type of sort of agriculture in California was hunting and gathering. And so for most of human and Californian history, people have survived by collecting from nature, collecting fish, collecting things like acorns. And in pre-European Native American California, this type of food production lasted for around 10,000 years. And when we describe hunting and gathering, one way that kind of metaphor we use is extensive versus intensive land use. And what that means is that if you're having to go out and gather up food from the landscape, you have to gather it over a very large area to collect enough food that you need. So you collect over a large area, but you're not really using that area intensely. You have very low impact on the land. And that's a good way to describe the way that food was produced in pre-European California. People had a range over a wide area, but did not use it as intensively. Now, with domestication of plants and animals, you have more intensive use of the land. So with agriculture, we can produce a lot more food in a smaller area, but we really have to use that land intensively. And that intensive production creates a lot of food and supports larger populations. There's different types of agriculture. Dryland farming means you rely on the rain primarily for watering your crops, but if it's not dry land, it's irrigated. This is where crops use artificial water sources such as dams and canals and sprinklers. Yeah, and irrigation, which is using artificial forms of water supply, is incredibly important in the Mediterranean climate because of the dry summer, that we don't have summer rain. So we really rely upon storing water in places like the Sierra Nevada and utilizing that water during the dry parts of the year. And during the Spanish-Mexican era, there was limited farming, and that was really limited to where conditions were favorable because of the lack of extensive irrigation projects. So that was really in what we call the cismontane California, the coastal wetter parts of California, and less so in the drier parts of California, the transmontane environments. Now, livestock was an important early agriculture commodity. By the mid-1800s, it's estimated that there was over 300,000 sheep, cattle, or horses in California. That was a primary, so the extensive amount of herding going on. By early statehood and the time of the gold rush, we had a population boom that we've discussed. So you had extensive grazing and what we call dryland farming. So parts of California where you could grow wheat, there was a real boom in developing food supply for this booming population. However, because California is so dry, it became really apparent right away that for a reliable food supply, irrigation systems would need to be developed. So especially on the east side of the Central Valley, these early irrigation systems began to developed into larger irrigation systems later on. Some of those we've discussed. So we've kind of looked at this in the past. We had this natural landscape. We use the San Joaquin Valley as an example, major agricultural area. And by the late 1800s, we had farming happening in the Central Valley around Fresno and in Tulare County and a few other places around the valley, Kern County. And by the early 1900s, we had the development of irrigation projects, and that really increased the amount of farming into new areas. And by the 1940s, around the time of the Great Depression, we had the Central Valley Project, some of these major irrigation systems, which really brought more agriculture into the San Joaquin Valley. And then by the 1970s, with the State Water Project, you had a really extensive amount of the landscape had been converted to agriculture. And so today we have both agriculture, urban areas, and also other primary industries such as oil and gas here, like in the southern San Joaquin Valley. And this really transformed the landscape of California from, this is part of the western San Joaquin Valley in 1920, and this is what it looks like today in the year 2000, or close to, and today as well. Here's another example from part of western Fresno County in 1922, and the same area more recently. So a much different landscape over time with this increase in agriculture.